Hello and namaste, everyone. Welcome to the final session of KT Kurakani. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone who has been joining in these sessions and supporting us. Introducing myself, I'm Vishal Yonjan from Kathmandu Triennale programming team. This session will highlight the collaborative work titled Nepali Power and Implications, Symbolism, and Research Embedded Therein. The collaboration culminated in triptych of a painting executed by Tashi Lama in a language of thangka painting that visualized the ongoing research by Köken Ergun. The artist will be in conversation with writer Amish Raj Mulmi, who has work published within the same subject matter of China's growing presence in Nepali infrastructure and economy. So introducing our speakers and artists, Amish Raj Mulmi is the author of All Roads Lead North, Nepal's Turn to China. His writings have been published in the Himalayan Arc, Journeys East of Southeast, Al Jazeera, Roads and Kingdoms, Himal Southasia, India Today, the Kathmandu Post, and the Record. He is consulting editor at Writer's Site Literary Agency and has previously worked for Juggernaut Books and Hachette India. And the other speaker is other speaker is Köken Ergun. He is a filmmaker and a video artist. Ergun works collaboratively with his subjects over an extended period of time and often involves contributions of ethnographers, historians, and sociologists. His films received several awards at film festivals, including the Tiger Award for Short Film at the 2007 Rotterdam Film Festival and the Special Mention Prize at the 2013 Berlinale. We also have Tashi Lama, who is a visual artist based in Kathmandu. Lama is trained in traditional thangka painting and merges contemporary influences. He's also a part of Bhaktipur-based Hakrit Collective. So I would like to pass on the stage to Amish Mulmi, who will be taking forward the conversation with Köken and Tashi. So thank you, and passing on to you, Amish.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, the Triennale. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation around these visual imaginations of China and Nepal. And I'd like to begin by just talking about a little visit of mine to Raswa that has really stuck with me since the time I went there in, I think, April 2019. And there's this Raswa, as we all know, is a border district with China. And right now it's the only land border trading post where basically China's, where we can bring in, Nepal brings in goods from China over land. And there's this stretch of 20 kilometers from Shapur Basi to Raswagadi, which is the border, where China is building a dry port. China is building the border bridge. It was expanding upon the highway, and it was also building a hydropower project. And while I went there, it was a hub of activity. I mean, there was construction everywhere. There was dust everywhere. In Timure, which is where the dry port was being built, some people were pleased that land prices were going up. Some people were obviously really irritated with the dirt and the dust and all the construction noise that was happening. And then in the middle of Timure, all of that, this fragile state of the mountain suddenly comes to be realized, where this house is buried in a sea of mud. It had been buried in a landslide a couple of years ago, and it just goes on to show the many ways in which China can be imagined here in Nepal. Raswa thus became a sort of physical manifestation of what the China dream could be in this country. And I think that really triggered an idea of how many ways of seeing China there are in this country. And there's this little passage that I wrote in my book that I thought it really stuck with me, that China is many things at once in Nepal today. It is a superpower, it is an aid giver, it is a friend in need, an essential provider, a demanding neighbor, an older brother, a competitor, a model of development and economic growth, and a vision of a developed future. So while when we put down in words, obviously these many imaginations come across, right? But when we start thinking of them visually, it's also interesting to imagine how people perceive this idea of economic development, of, let's say, infrastructure growth, particularly fueled by China, that is coming through. So what does China mean for Nepal to start with? My conversations across, and I'm sure many of you will agree, China represents a sort of wealth and prosperity. It represents infrastructure. For many, it represents the tourists who are coming in and therefore bigger, greater business. It represents opportunities, for example, for the Bodhicitta farmers that I met in Dhulikhel, who are selling seeds to China. There is more recently, it begins to appear as an interfering neighbor, who's not allowing trade to happen over the land borders, and Nepali students studying in China are not being allowed to go back. But how do we visually imagine or visually translate such imaginations? And essentially, there's something that we've been talking about, that what we need to do is sort of have a vocabulary for these ethnographic expressions, right? Like we imagine these larger geopolitical themes as primarily between capitals or between states, but we never sort of consider, or we rarely consider, the view of the people on the ground, or what do the people think of China and how do they sort of imagine it to be. And so a large part of this conversation, we'll sort of talk about this amazing triptych that all of you must have seen at the Triennale, which is titled Nepali Power, which essentially talks about these themes. And I want to inquire into how these themes came about and the collaborative process that went into creating such a massive body of work that sort of captures, as they rightly say, 1,000 words within these 3 images. So in the first, I'd immediately go to Köken, and we've spoken, as we know, we've been talking about how he has also developed these artistic projects around China in other countries such as Indonesia, and he's developing one in Europe as well. So my first question to him is essentially, how did you arrive at such, let's say, visual imaginations of the geopolitics or of China to start with?
Thank you for this very nice introduction. First of all, I have to tell everyone who's watching that in our long research, Amish was also a guide to us, Amish's work. So we were very much inspired by his book, All Roads Lead North, which is usually frequently on my desk when, I have to, but I'm showing his book, but with a with a blur effect. Well, very briefly, I'll tell you how this whole project started. I'm a filmmaker normally, but during the pandemic, I decided to change my practice because of some complications of making a film about China's expansion globally, and also COVID, and also some of the locations that I've been planning to shoot this film has had political instability, especially Ethiopia. Unfortunately, a civil war started. So the idea was to make a film about the global expansion of China. But during this research, I found out that there are also a lot of maps that visualize. So cartography was usually used for researchers, for politicians. And some of these cartographies were actually really wrong. And I started asking questions of what does cartography mean? Who is the authority behind that cartography? Like we're drawing a shape of the world, which is the one that we see on Google Maps, which is based on the Mercator map projection, which is essentially not very correct, especially the size of Africa, for example, is much smaller than it used to be. It should be, or Australia is supposed to be more far away from everything else. So this is kind of this Eurocentric, Western-centric projections have been always interesting me. But then China steps into the game. We see during the Belt and Road projects developments. We see, for example, China publishing maps, especially on many pro-Chinese propagandist websites, publishing maps of the South China Sea, for example, to claim those more waters for China. they sometimes shift the map and they make the China, south of China, seem a bit bigger and fatter, so they can claim the area for themselves. This is just an example. So when we're talking about large global infrastructure projects, we see a lot of maps fighting with each other. So it's not only a trade war, but it's a map war. So I was very much interested in these maps to be featured alongside my films when they're finished. But the films could never be done. And it seems still difficult to be able to make these films. So I decided, why don't I make the maps before making the films? So the idea was to make a map in one map in each part of the world where I'm interested in. Indonesia was one of them. Nepal, on the invitation of the Kathmandu Triennale, became one of them. I'm interested in making a map in Europe and Horn of Africa, hopefully, if we can make it, and to make another map in Greece where China is very present. And the idea would be to work with local artists in each location. So I would bring forth an idea of, let's say, let's make a map about the maritime Silk Road. And then I would start working with Indonesian artists and say, like, how would you, first I would present my research, very long research. I think it's been the third year that I'm working on this subject. So from a filmmaker, I became a geopolitical artist. I'm always joking. And this is the sign of the times as well. Artists are becoming more and more investigative and less exhibiting and less they're becoming more politically involved into the situation, especially if you're like somebody coming from Turkey, for example. For me, we are in the middle of all these political problems, and it's very natural that we are becoming more and more political, more and more active. And also we are seeing authoritarian states. Previously, they were targeting journalists and writers, but they're also now targeting artists because artists have been making stronger works. So I decided to trigger this very, very broad trade and geopolitical and financial topic, not with a film that would take years to finish, but with several maps that are easier to make and quicker to make in different parts of the world. And by doing so, I would map myself, with these artists' help, the global expansion model of China, let's say. But none of these maps are accurate. But who says which map is accurate? Do we know any map that is 100% accurate? Do we know any map that is not guided by one voice or two? Or there is no objectivity in, as you write books, there is no objectivity in writing. There is also no objectivity, I think, in making maps, unless it's a maritime map that sailors use, for example. But that's different. That's a technical one. I'm talking about the infographics, the world of infographics, and the world of map making in the political sphere. So the whole project is actually a critique of map making in the real essence of it. And we with the artists that I'm collaborating, we don't claim that these maps are showing the reality. They are just an artistic expression based on a long art research. So none of these maps that we're doing are actually, I can share my screen with you. None of these maps that we are doing, for example, now you're seeing, can you see the map? Okay. Yes. None of these maps that we're showing are actually showing the actual points and geographical locations of the infrastructure projects that are related to China. They are artistic impressions, but of course, they include a lot of knowledge, which is based on the research that I have done and that we have done with the artist, for example, Tashi. So we discussed a lot with Tashi after we opened him the general subject. So we developed it together. We were asking each other questions, saying, what do you think about this? Which would you be interested in? How do you envisage, how do you think we can represent this database into the the paintings that you are seeing here. For example, this one. Oops,
No,
sorry.
so yeah, that's an interesting idea, right? The idea of map war, and let's say the idea that, like, I mean, any map ultimately is a visual reduction to start with, right? And then you can sort of like how states imagine it, how you imagine it, like you correctly said, the Mercator projection sort of ill-defines Africa as to size, and obviously it requires new ways of seeing to look at that. Tashi, तपाईँलाई यो entire collaborative process हैन start गर्ने बेलामा what did China mean to you हैन अब चाइनाले कस्तो खाले एउटा भनौं न एउटा imagery create गर्यो तपाईको माइन्डमा to start with, अनि त्यो imageries त्यो visual, let's say, imaginations तपाईले क्यानभसमा ल्याउनलाई कुन अब the motives that you've used नि हैन त्यो अब जुन थाङ्काको मोटिभ्सहरु त्यसलाई कसरी डिसाइड गर्नुभयो एउटा just take us through what the entire process of collaboration.
सबैलाई चाहिँ धन्यवाद हैन मेनली चाहिँ अमिशलाई एकदम धन्यवाद तपाईको थ्रुबाट चाहिँ धेरै कुराहरु पनि थाहा भइरहेको थियो के बुकबाट कोकिङबाट पनि अनि मेनली चाहिँ अब म चाहिँ मेरो ब्याकग्राउन्ड चाहिँ थाङ्का बेस भएकोले थाङ्का पेन्टिङ प्र्याक्टिस गर्ने भएकोले चाहिँ मलाई चाहिँ मेनली अब यहाँ सुरुदेखि भन्नुपर्दा थाङ्का भनेको चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि कपडामा लेखिएको धार्मिक चित्रहरूलाई चाहिँ तिब्बतीमा चाहिँ थाङ्का भनिन्छ हैन अनि त्यसबाट चाहिँ अब थाङ्का पेन्टिङहरु बनाइन्छ अब मैले चाहिँ मलाई चाहिँ यसमा जम गर्नुभन्दा अगाडि चाहिँ यो चाहिँ एउटा कोलाबोरेटिभ आर्ट प्रोजेक्ट भयो नि त अनि मलाई चाहिँ के भनेको थियो भने तपाईलाई रिसर्च मटेरियलहरु प्रोभाइड गरिन्छ अनि त्यसबाट चाहिँ तपाईले आफ्नो वे अफ स्टाइलमा कामहरुमा चाहिँ काम गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ मलाई चाहिँ अब त्यो रिसर्च मटेरियलहरु चाहिँ प्रोभाइड गरेको थियो नि जसमा चाहिँ मलाई सुरुमा चाहिँ के भएको थियो भने अब त्यो चाइनाले चाहिँ कसरी नेपालमा चाहिँ प्रोजेक्टहरु इनिसिएट गरिरहेको छ भनेर चाहिँ त्योबाट बुझ्नु मन लागेको थियो जब मैले रिसर्च मटेरियलहरु पढ्दै गएँ हैन अनि मलाई के एउटा आइडियाले चाहिँ क्लिक भयो भने 2015 भन्दा अगाडि पनि त्यस्तो जियोपोलिटिकल त्यो भन्नाले त्यो काम त्यो जियोपोलिटिकल त्यो कामहरु चाहिँ भइरहेको थियो मैले चाहिँ अनि 2015 मा जब अर्थक्वेक गयो अनि त्यसपछि चाहिँ नेपाली पावर भनेर चाहिँ त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ बढी नै के रे नेपाली पावरहरु चाहिँ त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ देखे जस्तो लाग्छ किनभने अब त्यतिखेरको नेपाली जनताहरुको स्ट्रगल हैन त्यतिखेर नेपाली जनताहरुले त्यो स्ट्रगलबाट कसरी माथि उक्लिने कोसिस गरेको हैन अनि एज अ त्यसको साइडमा चाहिँ के पनि देख्यो भने यदि इन्डियाले अब केही समयपछि अब त्यो नाकाबन्दी पनि गर्दियो हैन अनि त्यसपछि फेरि झन् नेपाली पावर भनेर चाहिँ एउटा छर्लङ्ग भयो के नेपाली पावरहरु कसरी चाहिँ छ भनेर चाहिँ त्यतिखेरको गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ देखे के हैन अनि त्यतिखेर चाहिँ गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ होला त्यतिखेर गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ अनि त्यो इन्डियाको डिपेन्ड भयो भने चाहिँ यस्तोसम्म स्थिति पनि आउन सक्छ भनेर चाहिँ त्यस बेला चाहिँ अब नेपाल गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ चाइना गभर्नमेन्टलाई चाहिँ प्रोजेक्टहरु चाहिँ प्रस्ताव गरेको थियो एटलिस्ट त्यो 36 वटा प्रोजेक्टहरु चाहिँ प्रस्ताव गरेको थियो त्यसमध्येमा पनि अनि चाइना गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ 9 वटा प्रोजेक्टहरु चाहिँ अब गर्छु भनेर चाहिँ इनिसिएट गरेको थियो अनि अब त्यो 9 वटा प्रोजेक्टमा पनि मलाई चाहिँ कोकेनले चाहिँ मेरो कोअर्डिनेटरले 3 वटा प्रोजेक्ट रिसर्च मटेरियलहरु चाहिँ दिएको थियो जसमा चाहिँ हाइड्रो पावर थियो हैन अनि ट्रान्समिसन लाइन अनि केरिङ रेलवे अनि यी चीजहरुमा चाहिँ मैले आफ्नो ट्रेडिसनल बेस एलिमेन्टहरु लिएर चाहिँ काम गरेको थिएँ जसमा चाहिँ अब त्यो कृतिमुख भयो हैन कृतिमुख चाहिँ कृति भनेको एज अ ग्लोरी भयो अनि फेस मुख भनेको फेस एज अ ग्लोरी फेसलाई चाहिँ लिइन्छ के त्यसलाई चाहिँ यो चाहिँ प्रत्येक हाम्रो मठ मन्दिरहरुको एज अ गेटको माथिपट्टि तोरण राखेको हुन्छ त्यसको मेन इन्ट्रान्समा चाहिँ त्यो राखेर हुन्छ यसको मेन काम भनेको चाहिँ गार्डियन गर्नु भने मैले यो फर्स्ट पेन्टिङमा चाहिँ के गरेको थिएँ भने एज अ गार्डियन गेटमा चाहिँ त्यो रसुवालाई चाहिँ एज अ गार्डियन गेटमा चाहिँ इस्टाब्लिस गरेर त्यसबाट चाहिँ हाम्रो फ्युचरमा चाहिँ कस्तो कस्तो त्योसँगै अट्याच भएर चाहिँ कस्तो कस्तो के अरे त्यो इम्प्याक्टहरू कस्तो कस्तो डेभलपमेन्टहरू योसँगै कसरी आइरहेछ भने चाहिँ त्यो फर्स्ट पेन्टिङमा चाहिँ त्यसरी देखाउनु खोजिरहेको छ अनि एज अ यो होल प्रोजेक्ट एज अ म्याप भएको कारणले चाहिँ हामीले त्यो एज अ म्याप अनुसार नै त्यसरी नै प्लान गरेको थियो अनि त्यो अब त्यो म्यापमा चाहिँ एज नाम पनि त्यसरी नै प्लेसमेन्ट भइरहेको थियो अनि अर्को चाहिँ मकारा पनि युज गरेको थियो एज अ मिथिकल क्रिएचर त्यो चाहिँ वाटरसँग रिलेटेड भएको कारणले चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ वाटरसँग चाहिँ केही नयाँ कुराहरू गर्नु खोजिरहेको थियो अनि त्यो सेकेन्ड पेन्टिङमा चाहिँ अब मैले चाहिँ एज अ त्यो मकरालाई चाहिँ एज अ वाटर इलिमेन्ट भएको कारण चाहिँ त्यसलाई चाहिँ वाटरसँग रिलेट गरिरहेको थियो अनि त्यसको साथसाथै चाहिँ मैले त्यसमा चाहिँ अब त्यो एज अ त्यो वाटर अब हाइड्रो पावर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी ड्याम हुने भयो भने त्योसँग भएको बस्तीहरू चाहिँ कहाँ जान्छ त्योसँग भएको त्यो बस्तीहरू चाहिँ कसरी मिलाएर लान्छ होइन अनि त्यसले अब त्यसमा पानी इन्भाइरोमेन्टल त्यो इम्प्याक्ट चाहिँ कस्तो हुन्छ भने त्यो एउटा क्वेसन पनि छोडिरहेको थियो मैले त्यसरी चाहिँ अगाडि बढाइरहेको छु अनि त्यसको साथसाथै अनि पछि फ्युचरमा यो ड्याम बन्यो भने एज अ भयो भने चाहिँ हाम्रो साउथ इस्ट एसियासँग चाहिँ कसरी त्यो इलेक्ट्रिसिटीहरू प्रोड्युस हुन्छ भने चाहिँ त्यसरी चाहिँ यो प्रोजेक्टहरूलाई चाहिँ अगाडि बढाइरहेको छ अनि त्यो अर्को चाहिँ भने नेपाली पावर भनेर चाहिँ एज अ हामीले त्यो थर्ड पेन्टिङ चाहिँ एज अ यो दुईवटा पेन्टिङको चाहिँ कोरिलेट गर्नु खोजेको त्यो नेपाली पावर एज अ इन्डिभिजुअल क्वेसन चाहिँ के हो भनेर एज अ भ्युअरलाई चाहिँ त्यो क्वेसनहरू चाहिँ छोडिरहेको यति नै भन्नुपर्छ
त्यो मैले एउटा चाहिँ के नोटिस गरेँ भने नेपाली पावरमा चुच्चे नक्सा चाहिँ छ रहेछ
त्यो अहिलेको त्यो हाम्रो नयाँ कारण
no, that's very interesting, Köken. So I'm sure, like, I mean, you also followed that. It's interesting to see how, I mean, one part of the triptych is obviously about how, let's say, the train is being imagined, right? Or the train is being imagined in Nepal, the sort of visual representation of that. And the second part is the part about the hydro sort of dream. And that is, I think, every Nepali has been sold that dream for, I think, at least 50 to 60 years now. But the thing that we rarely sort of talk about is, I mean, we attach a lot of our dreams to the economic progress that comes from hydropower, but we rarely talk about the ecological disaster or the potential, let's say, environmental damage that we do. So it's a sort of a combination between the balance between, let's say, economic progress or ecological disaster. And that is something that I noticed in the first triptych as well, in the first painting, where you can see the cranes going, and I think there is one particular portion where it seems a little dusty, it seems like rocks are falling down. Was this all conscious? Like, was this all something that you decided, both of you decided that, all right, these are the sort of ideas that we want to sort of imagine. These are, let's say, from the geopolitics down to the, let's say, the people that we were talking about earlier.
Yes, we talked about the environmental effects of these projects, and both for the railway and the various hydropower projects. When we did our research, we found a lot of issues voiced by the local communities or even individual accounts that is, that can be read from sources. Well, we're looking, for example, at the first painting with Chepu at the top. I mean, we both were aware that humans are digging under the Himalayas to make a train tunnel, and this requires a lot of, for example, also manpower. and quite dangerous work. It's not only the environmental concerns, but it's also the people working. For example, here, I think Tashi's impression with the environmental concern of this explosion is, can you see the close-up of this circle where the snake is kind of like it's losing its skin because of this massive explosion? And this is what we decided to put. It's like in the middle of the painting. I mean, me and our producing or research assistant Tuti, who's also in this conversation, we just told Tashi that let's highlight that the fact that this is digging under the mountains, and then Tashi decided to put the mountains in the center of the painting. So it's like a threshold that they have to pass, and it's kind of narrowing in this passage. And this for us would be kind of highlighting the environmental effect of it. And then this big bulldozer or like construction machine is also related to what you see below of the workers. During our research, for example, we tried to find out accounts and stories of workers who are digging either hydroelectricity tunnels, because tunnels are also built for hydroelectricity, or other sort of tunnels. Actually, we were after somebody, I forgot the town. It starts with an M. Tuti, maybe she can write on the chat if she hears us. Maluku, I think, not Maluku in Indonesia, but like Malaku, I think this town, for example, there's an engineer who takes this camera and goes into the tunnels to talk with the people, with the laborers, with the people there having their lunch break. We don't see these stories. We don't hear these. Where?
Makalu,
not Maluku, sorry, Makalu. We don't hear these, but we talked about, we don't hear these in sources. I mean, except for your book, Amish, you're talking to people. But the majority of the information that comes from about the Belt and Road initiative is usually what's the trade benefit, how much work it will bring, how much money it will bring, but who's doing these works? Who's building these tunnels? So we wanted to show, at least in a painting, the laborers who are working in these tunnels day and night sometimes, or who will be working in the tunnels. So then Tashi and I, we spoke about this, and with Tuti, and we spoke about this through, I think, 2 months. And then we said it should be in the painting, and Tashi decided to put them in one of the circles in the thangka here. And then there's a future kind of foreshadowing of how it will affect Nepal's economy. As you know, as you wrote on your book, Amish, as well, and as I've seen with my own eyes, like last month, there is an yet unopened Pokhara International Airway, which is actually larger than Kathmandu, and it is a Chinese engagement. And no wonder that it's a Chinese engagement, because it's all linking to each other. The railway is going to be extended after Kathmandu to Pokhara and maybe to Lumbini. So Tashi decided to put this airplane right next to Pokhara. And in the Chepu, we see, in the Makara painting, the third painting, it's going to take time to load a bit. We talked about land reclamations of entire villages being subdued underwater. And of course, there was also the other issue of run of the river projects, which is hydroelectricity projects, which doesn't create a dam. But we decided to focus on the dam style. And here you see a village completely drowned by the waters, which is actually bringing power to rest of, I mean, I read this as a more light area where power is distributed from Nepal, but at what cost? And then the question, Nepali power, is actually a question with an invisible question mark. We're actually asking hydropower, Nepali power. That's why we decided to focus on the hydropower projects rather than, for example, highway projects that China and Nepal are doing. It was an artistic decision, power. And then I came up with the idea, why don't we make one painting, just text. And then we talked about this for quite a while, and what should we put under the text? And again, speaking about cartography, usually the cartography that we are used to, in the maps that we're used to see, we see Nepal sandwiched between China and India. And it's kind of powerless in these maps. But what if we change the map and turn the direction? Instead of Nepal being like this, we turn it like this. So we decided to give Nepal more power and more tension in the map. So we took a vertical description, representation of Nepal, something that we're not used to it. And then we didn't name the countries in the neighboring countries, but of course everybody can guess that that's either China or India. And then Tashi came up with the colors, the color scheme. And in this painting, we do not have the question mark, but this we wanted to make it as abstract as possible, because I mean, I personally think that art should ask more questions and confuse us and trigger us to make more research, not just like answer the question and then we walk away. So the Kathmandu Triennale, which is, by the way, an excellent exhibition. Those of you who have seen it are very lucky. I have to say, especially this beautiful curation about cartographic problems is the whole problems of cartography in the world in a nutshell. I think it's an exhibition that will be talked about for a while. So we contributed to these discussions of cartography because there's a lot of indigenous cartographies, like maps. For example, there's this fantastic map from memory of the Aboriginal sailors who actually draw the map on land before they go to the sea, but they don't look at the map in the sea. They don't take the map with them, they memorize the map. So the whole perception of maps and cartography was already, we knew from the curators of our exhibition that they would criticize, they would be very critical. So we thought it would be better to ask this question in a very abstract way, but of course give hints, like what is this what is this power we're talking about? It is, of course, the hydro power, but in our research, we looked at a lot of war and state propaganda posters. For example, I would scan war posters from the Second World War or the First World War in Europe and send it to Tashi, and Tashi would work on them for a while, and then he came up with the fonts, the colors. And then this was a challenging thing for us. Tashi would know the details. When you get closer, you see this electricity buzz. They are giving us the hint of the painting where we see the hydropower projects.
No, that's quite amazing. The sort of and you guys, you were both in separate countries at this time, right?
Yeah.
You were both working, like Tashi was in Nepal and you were in Turkey during the lockdown, and wow. So that, I'm sure that must have, no, but that's the other thing, right? Like, I mean, when you're talking about these symbols and Tashi, I know, तपाईँले अघि भने जस्तै है, अब thangka is a religious art form बाटै सुरु भएको हो हैन, and they still are conceived to be भनौं न एउटा religious art form नि हैन. तर how do you, like, तपाईले यसलाई यो ट्रिप्टिकमा पनि कन्टेम्पोराइज गर्नु जुन भएको छ नि हैन, यो सिम्बल्सहरु, these religious symbols, how does that process work के हैन, त्यो एउटा भयो. And the second thing is obviously एउटा another very interesting, this is more of an observation than a question, that about all these expressions we see is about China and Nepal. When we talk about it, we constantly think about it. China is engaging in Nepal through the Tibetan geography, but it's not engaging in Nepal through the Tibetan identity or the culture or the history, which is what Nepalis are more familiar with than the geography itself. So your Twitter would be to translate these religious icons into contemporary art forms, and then this other idea of what these Tibetan, let's say, motifs mean in today's, let's say, Nepal. त्यसलाई कसरी हेर्नुभयो तपाईले?
यो चाहिँ खासमा अब हाम्रो चाइना र नेपालको हिस्ट्रीदेखि नै त्यो एउटा बोन्डिङ छ के, भनौँ सायद त्यो अब अरण्यको 13th सेन्चुरीदेखि नै हो, किन नहोस् यहाँ फरेनरको त्यहाँ गएर मूर्तिहरू बनाउने होइन त्यसरी पनि आर्ट एक्सचेन्ज भइरहेको छ अनि हाम्रो सोसियल कल्चर भयो अब त्यहाँ बोर्डरमा भएको एउटा 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 फिल्डबाट टिबेटबाट नेपालमा आउने त्यो एउटा सोसियल कल्चरहरू एक्सचेन्ज भयो अनि त्यस्तो कुराहरूले चाहिँ मलाई ट्रिगर गरिरहन्थ्यो कि अनि त्यसमा हुने त्यो इलिमेन्टहरू भयो त्यो ट्रेडिसनल इलिमेन्टहरू भयो त्यो कल्चरले नै डिराइभ गरिरहन्थ्यो कि अनि त्यो त्यो चिजहरूले चाहिँ मलाई पहिलादेखि नै ट्रिगर गर्थ्यो अनि हाम्रो अब यता यता हेर्ने हो भने पाटन भक्तपुर ललितपुर यो सबै एउटा म्युजियमै हो कि अनि त्यो त्यो इलिमेन्टहरू नै त्यो पास अन हुने अनि कल्चरल एक्सचेन्ज हुने त्यस्तो कुराले चाहिँ मलाई एकदमै त्यो हुन्छ नि एकदम भित्रदेखि नै ट्रिगर गर्थ्यो र अनि त्यही कुराहरूलाई चाहिँ मैले कन्टेम्पोराइज गरिरहेको थिएँ कि यो कामहरूमा अनि त्यसले चाहिँ मलाई म हेल्प चाहिँ गरेको छ अनि मलाई चाहिँ यति चाहिँ के थाहा भने पहिलादेखि मेरो प्र्याक्टिस यही ब्याकग्राउन्ड भएकोले चाहिँ मलाई चाहिँ यसमा काम गर्नु चाहिँ मोर रिलेभेन्ट चाहिँ लाग्थ्यो अनि त्यही अनुसार चाहिँ मैले कामहरू चाहिँ त्यसरी अरेन्ज गरेको यो काममा अनि मेरो पहिलाको अब योभन्दा अगाडिको कामहरू पनि त्यसरी नै रिलेट भएर आइरहेको थियो अनि त्यसलाई नै पुसन गर्नको लागि चाहिँ यो काम चाहिँ झन् हेल्पफुल गर्यो अनि मलाई अर्को लागेको के चिज भनेको हाम्रो यो मैले योभन्दा अगाडि कसैसँग नि कोलाबोरेटिभ प्रोजेक्ट गरेको थिएन कि अनि यसबाट पनि त्यो च्यालेन्ज चाहिँ आउँदो रहेछ कि अब कोकेनले चाहिँ कोकेनको आइडियामा मैले मेरो आइडियाहरू कसरी एक्सेप्ट गर्ने होइन दुवैको अब त्यो आइडियाहरू मिलेर जानुपर्ने अनि त्यस्तो कुराहरू चाहिँ यो काममा गर्नु पाउँदाखेरि र त्यो कामबाट निस्केको आउटपुटले चाहिँ त्यो कोलाबोरेटिभ काम चाहिँ देखाउँदो रहेछ मलाई चाहिँ यसरी चाहिँ यो कामहरू चाहिँ आएको
तर अनि त्यसमा अनि यो जुन पुरानो मोटिभ्सहरू हुन्छ नि अब जस्तै भनौँ न तपाईँले यो जुन मकरलाई हाल्नु भयो अनि तपाईँले त्यो तोरणमाथि हाल्ने गार्डियन डेटी जुन तपाईँले हाल्नुभयो अनि यसले के थाङ्कालाई कन्टेम्पोराइज गर्न सक्छ त भनौँ न होइन यसले आदि यो सिम्बल्सहरूले के क्यान वी सर्ट अफ लाइक देन इमेजिन स्टप कलिङ थाङ्का रिलिजियस आर्ट ओन्ली भनौँ न
एक हिसाबले त्यो हेर्दा पनि हुन्छ होला तर अब त्यसरी कन्टेम्पोराइज हुँदै आइरहेको छ नि त अब पहिला चाहिँ त्यो अब हामीले देखेको कुराहरू हेर्दा त्यही इलिमेन्टहरू त्यो प्रपर आइकोनोग्राफीसँग मिल्नै पर्छ होइन त्यसरी गर्दै आइरहेको छ आज अब चाहिँ समयअनुसार त्यो नै कन्टेम्पोराइज त्यो नै बदल्दै गइरहेको छ नि अनि मैले त्यही अनुसार अहिलेको सराउन्डिङलाई हेरेर नै कामहरू गरिरहेको छु त्यसको प्रपर त्यो त मैले त्यो त मैले बिगारेको छैन नि चाहिँ आज त्यो नै देखाएको छु त्यसैलाई नै नयाँको यहाँको त्यो सब्जेक्ट अनुसार त्यसरी नै मैले त्यो प्लेसमेन्ट गरेर यसलाई अब त्यसरी
हेरेँ so Köken, like this is something that I had been thinking about for a while, like after we had a chat about it, the Indonesian map as well. And while you've been researching these projects, right, about this China dream across the world, what are the differences or similarities that you found between, let's say, how Nepalis have imagined China, or let's say how Indonesians imagine China, or Europeans, or let's say in the Horn of Africa, like you're planning to do? Is there any sort of like difference, or is there any sort of similarities that you found?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there are major differences. I mean, we are approaching a new Cold War, let's say, or heated Cold War, let's say, because of another war happening just north of here between Russia and Ukraine. And but I must say, actually, this is between Russia and the West, let's say, and China is another non-Western power, which is the second biggest economy in the world, which will be very soon the first, and India will be also rising more and more. Some say that they will be just India and China left in the world at the top spot for a long while in the future. So as Amitav Ghosh also mentioned in his last book, The Nutmeg's Curse, we are approaching very interesting times about the Western dominion being shaken both financially and culturally and trade-wise. So these are I think the little earthquakes before the major one. So I'm lucky myself to be lived in a kind of like this transition period in the world where I was born in the years when the Western anything Western was the norm for everything. But now we are seeing that there's another power paradigm from the East. This is not necessarily good or bad. I'm not saying one is good or one is bad. I'm interested to understand what this fight, call it Cold War or heated Cold War, what this, let's say, rivalry will bring to the world. And I'm interested to see from the very beginning, what are the, can there be aesthetic outputs of this? How is soft power used in this game, in this fight? So deep inside, I'm interested in soft power, how the West has been using the soft power and how China has been using the soft power. And the project that I did before this was about Turkey's global expansion and how Turkey was using soft power, especially in Africa and Southeast Asia, to promote their own model of education, international network of international Turkish schools. So, and I've been very interested in how these strategies are actually have similarities between the industrial, during the Industrial Revolution or before the Industrial Revolution in the colonial period of the West. So I saw a lot of similarities between these kind of projects. So the Belt and Road project is not something completely new. It's a kind of like a pastiche of what the West have done, what the Ottomans have done in the past, what the Arab, we don't call them the colonizers, but they've been ruling the Indian Ocean for many, many years, especially East Africa. This is a history that is not read or written so much. And for example, the question of slavery. So it didn't start in the Atlantic, it started in the Indian Ocean. Yes, this is my general interest, and but I'm coming from the West, let's say, well, a bit in the middle of West and East, but still we are more Western, let's say, at least in our upbringing. So when I'm talking about these projects, or when I'm showing these projects, or when I work in these countries about these projects, people's perception of China differs in the country where they come from, what they do, how much relationship they have with Chinese investments, whether they have or not. This is one thing. And secondly, the state narrative. So if the state narrative is anti-Chinese, which we see a lot, that's a different approach that the public also has. But if the state narrative is neutral, then you listen to people individually, like you did in your book. For example, we can't deny the fact that Chinese investments bring a lot of economic opportunities for individuals, families, and communities in some parts of the world. You said it yourself in your research about Rasulagadi, the area where a lot of Nepali individuals or families are not, I can't say embracing, but they are practically thinking that Chinese investment is good for them on the ground. But then the state narrative or the political narrative can be different. There can be hidden racism against China in these narratives. There can be hidden racism against India, for example, speaking of Nepal. In Indonesia too, there can be hidden racism against anything Chinese. And that doesn't help the discussion because we're not talking about identity here. We're talking about, I mean, it's a web of things. It's finance, trade, identity. So I can't say the West is completely China bashing or the West is completely anti-China. No, a lot of Western countries like Germany, #1, is dealing with China in a very clever way, I can say, that they are kind of negotiating with both sides. Italy, for example, first signed an agreement with China for the Trieste port, then decided not to after Biden came to power. But before Biden came to power, they were working with China. Turkey is another example in the middle. So I can't say that these countries are not working with China, but the more you go west, the anti-Chinese sentiment is obviously more. And if China joins the war or supports the war on the side of Russia, this will be intensified. So there's this identity situation, and then there's the reality on the ground. For example, I haven't been, but I want to produce another map in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, if you ask people about China, they will have a deeper understanding of Chinese investments, because Hambantota port has been the power, like the poster boy of China investments in the world. There are countries who are not mature in the relationships with new China, let's say China after Xi Jinping. They have more experience. And then there are countries which have no experience about it. They're just new, and maybe they're financially not very well, so they're eagerly waiting for Chinese investments, but they don't investigate or they don't ask a lot of questions. When we did this project in Indonesia, we were looking at many ports. For example, there's a curious case in Cambodia where Chinese investment is building ports, yes, but nobody can understand whether that port will be soon a naval base. So there's lots of complexities, but as you say in the beginning of your presentation, it's also very important to talk to individuals, not only the state agenda, or not only journalists who are writing reports from their comfortable desks wherever they are in the world. You can't analyze Chinese investments just by looking at newspapers or following very biased TV channels, because none of them are non-biased. So I think it's very valuable for people like you to go on the ground, like you went to Mustang or Rasuwa, to talk to people, to talk to individuals, and weigh all of these in a big pot. And then the mixture, the food that comes out of it is maybe slightly close to the answer, but we shouldn't have a reactionary attitude toward anything Chinese or anything American. Then I think that would be wrong for the whole countries in question.
That's a very interesting point. You're telling me about the reaction of the people, right? Because that brings me to another question for both of you, actually. That what is the when the exhibit was out, it was put up for a whole month and thousands of people saw it. What is the sort of reactions that you got? Like, I mean, when people saw it, did they come up to you like, did they say that, okay, this is what I thought would be like, or did they say, oh, this is new? What are the sort of reactions that you've been, let's say, getting for the work? Tashi?
के अरे त्यो रियाक्सन त्यो डिफ्रेन्ट रियाक्सन थियो क्या डिफ्रेन्ट पिपलको अब उनीहरूले हेर्ने तरिका अब भनौँ न अब लेम्यानदेखि अब आर्टिस्टहरूसम्मको कुराहरू गर्दाखेरि डिफ्रेन्ट भ्यूहरू आउने अनि लेमा अब जस्ट भिजिटरहरू आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ त्यो कुराहरू गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ उनीहरूले आफूसँग भएर त्यो कुरा गर्ने कि आफू रिलेट भएर अब रिलेट भएर त्यो कुरा गर्ने अब मेरो गाउँ त यहाँ हो अब यहाँ यो के अरे अब हाइड्रो पावर आउन लागेको छ यस्तो यस्तो भनेर अनि यसले चाहिँ मलाई यसरी हिट गरिदिएको छ यस्तो यस्तो कुराहरू उनीहरूको इन्सपिरेसन कुराहरू उनीहरूको त्यो मेमोरिजको कुराहरू चाहिँ आउने अनि त्यो नेपाली पावर मैले यसरी नक्सा त देखेकै छैन त्यो कसरी आयो होइन अनि त्यो कलरहरूको कुरा गर्ने अब त्यो नेपाली पावर लेखेको छ त्यो रातो भनेको चाहिँ के अरे स्टप भने होला त्यो हरियो भने त्यो गो भने होला यस्तो यस्तो कुराहरू नसोचेको कुराहरू चाहिँ सुन्नु पाउने होइन अनि त्यही कुराहरूले अनि मलाई चाहिँ नयाँ नयाँ डिमेन्सनको त्यो नयाँ नयाँ डिमेन्सन खोज्नु चाहिँ मद्दत गर्दो रहेछ कि यस्तो कुराहरूले अनि अब कोही आर्टिस्टहरू आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ अब उनीहरूको थट प्रोसेसहरू बुझ्दाखेरि चाहिँ राम्रो थट प्रोसेसहरू चाहिँ छुट्टै हुने रहेछ अनि एकजना चाहिँ के इन्ट्रेस्टिङ लागेको थियो भने एकजना चाहिँ पिएचडी गरिरहेको रहेछ त्यही हाइड्रो पावर इलेक्ट्रिसिटीको बारेमा अनि उसलाई चाहिँ त्यो पेन्टिङ हेरेर चाहिँ एकदम रिलेट भयो अरे क्या म अब त्यहाँबाट के अरे अब म आई थिङ्क मलाई चाहिँ थाहा भएन कुन देशको अनि त्यहाँबाट अब यहाँ आउँदाखेरि म यो कुराहरू यहाँ आएर रिलेट गरिरहेको छु भने मैले यसमा काम गर्दाखेरि कति रमाइलो हुन्छ त्यस्तो कुराहरू चाहिँ सुन्नु पाइरहेको यो एक्जिबिसन
Köken, you want to add to that? So you're just telling me about some PhD student on hydropower who's telling him that, oh, he had to come all the way to Nepal to sort of relate to his actual thesis.
Okay. Tuti was translating some of the previous words to me as well. That's very interesting when Tashi, when workers came and they asked where their villages can be, and this is very interesting. About the PhD candidate. I also I think we were very happy, for example, to see you tweeting about the work before we even met you, because you went there and you said like, this is the project that I've been working on, and then here I see an installation with it. And I think this is what we try to do. We wanted to create discussion, and we would be very interested how, for example, that PhD candidate evaluates the work later. Because I mean, I personally think art is not just a spectacle. It should lead us to critical thinking, and it should not be fine arts. I think it doesn't have to be fine or beautiful. I think it could be, like making people angry, frustrated. So it creates a conversation, and the otherwise it becomes just the ego of the artist. Like, I painted it and I put it there, you have to like it. So this is not interesting. And the reactions that we got, of course, apart from the people who were drawn like a magnet to the words Nepali Power, and under that they took a lot of selfies. But that's also beautiful. I find it beautiful because it's a performative aspect of the work that sometimes we're too intellectual to think and to analyze things, but just the visual language is something different. And that's what I was fascinated by Tashi's work. I have to confess, I would go there every morning to look at the work, like I'm going to a temple. And I think sometimes we professionals are trying to kind of analyze things a lot. And when we say like, how do you describe the work, or how do the people show their feedback? Do they talk to you? But with their movements and with their their attachment, just by maybe taking pictures of the work, it's a feedback. So when I was there for a week in Kathmandu, I would see this was one of the most photographed works in that exhibition, in that room, in that venue. And this told me something. I mean, obviously that it was visually eye-catching, but it's not only that. There are other visually eye-catching works. It was something that they wanted to capture. And then I saw a lot of people also capturing the text on the wall as well. Because we don't have time these days, we just want to read it at home. And let's not forget, there's also another part of the work, which is a YouTube video that Jai Nepal, or like his YouTube name is Jai Nepal Satyam, has done. And that also includes another layer to the work. It's more discursive, more in-depth analysis of those projects, and people can watch it on YouTube. So if the administrator writes it, I don't know, on YouTube chats or on the Facebook
Maybe
Live.
We could put it on,
that would be great help to put Jai Nepal's 2 videos about this as well. So I've seen a lot of people fastly standing in front of them, or actually when Tashi and me, we were there, we saw a middle-aged lady with gray hair, and we said like, oh, she must be a foreigner somewhere, but she was very interested in the work. She was getting close to it. I said, let's go next to her, because I want to hear what she's saying or asking to people. It turns out that she knew me years ago from Germany. We give a talk together in a festival. She's a professor of anthropology, and her expertise is India and the region, a greater region. And she spoke very good Nepali with you, no, Tashi?
Yeah.
And interested in the work. So that's a glimpse that I could get in one week. So there were different people and different reactions to the work.
No, I think that's something I thought that, and this is something that I felt across the Triennale, but particularly with that, simply because I was keen in the subject as well, is that, I mean, these larger ideas about geopolitics, about state to state, and like you said, rightly said, this new Cold War, we have a tendency, or rather this entire narrative has a tendency to look at these ideas, at these states very coldly, you know, like as we in the pursuit of objectivity, we sort of forget that the ordinary person has their own, let's say, imaginations, their own perceptions about how geopolitics works and how, let's say, countries function with each other. And generally, this larger state of affairs, not just in their own country or their own society, but in the world as well. And that does not, I mean, it would be brash and it would be sort of like, very patronizing to dismiss them as sort of uninformed views. But these are the sort of views that shape, let's say, democracies. These are the views that shape the way things are done. And in recent times, we saw that with the entire debate around this MCC, another development grant project, this time by the US, and how the Nepali people imagined it to be. One of the very curious things I found was beyond the YouTube videos, all of that, was these ideas of what America means in Nepal. And I thought the contrast between what China has come to mean in Nepal and what the US has come to mean has sort of changed over a period of time, sort of inverted itself. They become mirror images of each other. And but the ordinary person understands that. And I think that also speaks volumes about, as you said, that art does not have to be something that is just inside let's say, a gallery or a museum, and you're just viewing and you're going, okay, I agree with the artist, or you derive your own interpretations out of it. No? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
No, so how much time do we have, Vishal, after this? In any case, so we'll continue this conversation. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, both of you, was this idea that you have this triptych, you have these sort of motives that are coming across, and then this larger idea of China and this country, right? How, let's say, like, I mean, you told me that you fixated on the train and obviously the hydropower, but the thing is that aid or development projects itself in countries, in lesser developed countries like Nepal, or let's say even in, like you just said about Sri Lanka, these aid projects themselves are performative in a very distinct way. No? Right? I mean, they intend to sort of showcase a particular nation's generosity towards another nation. Like when we imagine China and Nepal, right? In sitting in Kathmandu, you can see this brand new ring road with this underpass. You can see this brand new school in the middle of the city, and you have these ideas that, oh, look, this is what they built for us. And those sort of ideas also conveyed through aid itself, no?
To what itself?
Through aid. Like, let's say, I don't know if you noticed in Kathmandu while you were here, but like in the middle of the city, China has built this brand new school, you know, and earlier it was Nepal's oldest school, and it was demolished in the 2015 earthquake. And this just a visual, let's say, presence of this new school, or let's say this new highway, that's this new ring road that's going across Kathmandu Valley, and in contrast to what it was earlier. And that also sends a message, you know, that in the common people's mind, that, oh, look, like, this is my aid projects looks like this, or rather this, like, you know, that's like a country, that's like Beijing telling Kathmandu that, look, this is what I can do for you. No?
Shall I answer?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I understand what you mean by this question. Thank you very much, because I wanted to bring it up. In your part of the world, a lot of people have been to British schools, right? British education.
Yeah.
So what is it different if you go to a Turkish school in Nepal? Why is there a problem? I'm asking people. I mean, I'm not saying like Chinese education or Chinese schools in Nepal are good, but we have to understand the fact that there was another model which is exactly the same that China is doing, or Turkey was doing with its international schools. So we can't just make the discussion about whether the Chinese schools are bad for your country.
No, not about the Chinese schools as such. I'm talking about the idea of the project itself, the building, the structure itself, right? Like, for example, another example, let's say that I can give you in Kathmandu, right? When you're driving across the ring road, and this new ring road that's about like 4 lanes on each side, that is built by China. So these 8 projects, all these infrastructure projects that are built, the Pokhara airport, for example, they also bring in a very distinct, let's say, Chinese expression. No, the Chinese, let's say, artistic expression enters the sort of vocabulary. You have this, the infrastructure itself, the project itself becomes a symbol of this other country's generosity, like just by existing.
I see what you mean. Speaking of Pokhara Airport, it's huge. It doesn't really fit the land and the area of Nepal. I think the landscape, but there is a statement by China, because China, not only China, these days all airports are made big. The Istanbul airport is huge. That's a kind of message to the world, like how big I can make. Look, mine is bigger than yours, and I'm gonna make it big. But sometimes, okay, Istanbul airport is like super busy because of Turkish Airlines, but there are some airports, and there are some museums in China, for example, or there are some museums in other parts of the world, which are built as infrastructure projects, and there's no programming in it, there's no audience in it. Some of them are closed. So nowadays they're making things big, 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 big. And I think when I saw Pokhara Airport, I was like saying like, okay, you need an airport here, maybe, but why so big? That's an aesthetic, that's soft power. That's soft power to make it so big. But yeah, I mean, there is aid and there is aid. And if the stage where you're acting in these infrastructure projects and geopolitical investments, if the stage is empty and there's not so many discussions, for example, like did the people in the government or state of Nepal listen to the local activists when the airport was being built, or when the highways was being built? Or similarly in Tashi's paintings, I'm wondering how many people have been talked to in the neighborhood or in the villages where these big dam projects are being planned. So that's why political activism and environmental activism is very important. Of course, if somebody is listening to you, but if they're not, maybe it's good to be more and more active in your activism, more sometimes even like strong and violent in doing things so that your voice can be heard. Because there's a giant elephant now in Pokhara, and we don't have Chinese tourists. Who's going to come there? So it might go wrong, Amish. I mean, maybe making these things. China is also like experimenting with their investments. They are doing it in their own style, in their own culture. I see there are lots of insensitivities to the local context when they're building things, and the local knowledge is probably telling them like, don't build these big things near the sea, or not these. They're gonna be, because they know their environment. But local people are not listened to, because the people who are governing those countries are just trying to, sorry my expression, save their ass, because they're probably going to lose the election if they don't bring money. But it's a very good question. Like, the aesthetics of expansion is very important, and I think with like Tashi's giant dam, I think we try to show that. And he also chose to make the dam into a very significant gold color. No, maybe we can ask Tashi about that. Gold.
Tashi, so yeah, so Sunola dam देखि लिएर, but generally, like, I mean, like, अब तपाईं काठमाडौँमा बसेर हैन, मैले अघि भने जस्तै त्यो रिङ रोड देखिन्छ हैन, स्कुल देखिन्छ, यत्रो ठुलो देखिन्छ शहरको बिचमा, त्यसले पनि त स्टेटमेन्ट बन्छ नि हैन?
त्यसले पनि भन्नाले अब यो ठुलो प्रोजेक्टलाई चाहिँ स्टेटमेन्ट बनाउन हेल्प गर्छ खास हो, मलाई त्यस्तो लाग्छ हैन। अब सानो कुराहरू गर्दै गइसकेपछि यसलाई चाहिँ पछि ठुलो प्रोजेक्टमा हात हाल्न चाहिँ एकदम सजिलो हुन्छ कि उसको सहभागिता उसले देखाउँदै गइरहेछ नि त। अनि उसलाई पछि त्यो प्रोजेक्टहरू ल्याउनु पर्यो भने उसलाई कुनै ठुलो गाह्रो चिज होइन। मलाई चाहिँ मैले त्यसरी हेरिरहेको छु अहिले। त्यो नेसनलको त्यो रोडहरू भयो अब त्यो दरबार हाई स्कुलहरू भयो अनि त्यो कन्स्ट्रक्सनहरू गरिरहेको छ अब त्यो हाम्रो त्यो बसन्तपुरको भयो तिनीहरूले चाहिँ उसलाई चाहिँ अब पछिको लागि बाटो बनाएको जस्तो लाग्यो त्यसरी चाहिँ
सुनौलो दामदेखि बाटो हुँदै आयो कि
त्यसको लागि चाहिँ बाटो बनायो
No. All right. So that was, I think that we are at the end of a very, very exciting conversation. I think we can keep talking and we can keep chatting about this the more and perhaps over a couple of drinks as well. So thank you. Yeah. And hopefully we can do this soon, Köken, once you're back in Nepal. But thank you both of you for what is a sort of an extraordinary visual imagination of this other country and the dreams it brings to, let's say, the ordinary Nepali, and sort of realizing that into visual form, and to the Triennale for hosting this conversation as well as this exhibition. The more China gets involved in Nepal, the more these conversations will come up, the more such discussions will come up, and I'm sure such visual imaginations, as we are seeing, we will keep building upon them. And I'm hoping by the time the next Triennale happens, Köken and Tashi will both have another, let's say, triptych to tell us about the China dream in Nepal. With that, thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening, and namaste, everyone. All right. Vishal, over to you.